Oh, you can't find this in the store.
Well, folks, this is
Not this, baby. This right
before I get
here.
into
This is
this whole thing,
customized.
let's talk about the fact
You
that
better
we've got
get like
about 4 months
me.
before the election and we're about to make a major push. So everybody should just hang in there and stay tuned. Um, we've got a lot of stuff to do. The convention's coming up in August, and the heat's going to be on. Um, so let me talk about just putting a little postmortem on all of this chatter about Joe Biden, because honest to God, folks, we do not even have a functional democracy right this minute. So let me give you my perspective on all of this. Is Joe Biden old? He sure is. You know, I'm older than I ever thought I was going to be when I was 25, 30 years old. And, you know, we knew Joe Biden was old. This is not a new fucking revelation for the American public, nor is it a revelation for the media, nor is it a revelation for Hollywood, nor is it a revelation for the elitist Democratic Party, whatever they are calling for Joe Biden to step aside. If we all had a problem with Joe Biden's age, we could have dealt with that way before this. So what we have now going on is yet another excuse to be distracted, because the media is not letting this go. And some can argue that the fact that the Democrats are discussing it is proof that democracy exists. And I agree with that to some degree. But timing is kind of everything in life. And this is not that time. We're given a disproportional amount of time to an issue like, is Joe Biden capable of leading the country? Well, he's been fucking leading the country now for almost 4 years. And I don't know about where all of you sit, but where I'm sitting, a 70-year-old living on my Social Security, I'm better off now under Joe Biden than I ever was under any of my other presidents, Obama included, and certainly light years ahead of anything that the Republican Party has to offer the average American, because they've done absolutely nothing for the average American since taking over the House in 2022. And Donald Trump did jack shit for the average American in his 4 years, as whatever you want to call that. I called that the major shit show of the United States. We don't have a functioning democracy when we have a question about whether Joe Biden's a viable candidate, but we have a third party candidate named Robert F. Kennedy Jr., who is the scourge of America, a total fucking lunatic, a man who has never presented one iota of evidence for anything he's claiming, who has almost single-handedly destroyed the public health system in this country. Now we have people questioning vaccines, things that have saved millions of lives across the world for years. Do people have bad reactions to them? They sure do. People had bad reactions to penicillin. People have bad reactions to Tylenol. I know people who can't take Tylenol. You know, shit happens. And people who develop scientists who develop these vaccines can't account for every human being on the planet. But people have lost their fucking minds in America. Now we have Donald Trump threatening to defund schools that require vaccines. Well, let me tell you something. My kids were fully vaccinated. I have an autistic child. Her autism does not come from vaccines. Okay? It does not. That has already been debunked, but in the minds of the weak-minded Americans who continue to promote this bullshit, I don't know what to tell you. It's totally ridiculous that we have a guy like Robert F. Kennedy Jr. trying to siphon votes away from people who are actually legitimate candidates. And there's only one right now on the ballot, and that's Joe Biden. Robert F. Kennedy's whole platform competes more with the GOP than it does with the Democratic Party. He's not a Democrat. The only thing he shares in common with his father is his name and his womanizing. That's probably the only other thing. We don't have a functioning democracy when one side of the aisle continues to try to shut down the government so that they can hold people hostage with ridiculous laws about transgender Americans or gay Americans or people of color voting. They try to slip in their little hideous little oppressive amendments to bills like they did just recently, where they slipped in some transgender stuff in the new NDAA bill. We don't have a functioning democracy. When we have one candidate who's elderly, who has done his job to the best of his ability and has had literally one of the most successful presidential tenures of anybody in this country, and a man who has been convicted of 34 felonies, faces 54 more, is an adjudicated rapist who wears diapers because he can't control his bowels, makes up sentences, talks about sharks and batteries like that's normal, and we're worried about what Joe Biden talks about. A man who can't form sentences, who makes up words, who loses his train of thought constantly. And every time he has a gaffe, he blames the people setting up his rallies. A man who has no respect for women, does not give a shit about your children, cares about only one thing, himself, and who is now trying to distance himself from Project 2025 when everything that comes out of his mouth validates his ties to Project 2025. And I lament the days when we had an incumbent president that could run on a record of success, a record of what he attempted that was thwarted by the other side. I yearn for those days, because now what we have are a bunch of Americans who have to evaluate a president based on one 90-minute performance, a dog and pony show, as opposed to what his accomplishments are. And I think that's pretty pathetic. And let me tell you something else. I read Stephen King. I love George Clooney. I'm ambivalent about Ashley Judd because I've never seen a movie she's in that I thought was worth watching, but she's nevertheless there, and some people have. But I personally don't give a shit what they think Joe Biden should do, because you know what? They're all millionaires and billionaires, and they've never felt the pains of the average American person. So their opinion and their discussions about what Joe Biden should do mean nothing to me. They should stick to acting. Okay? That's what they should do, because they're not the average American. They haven't got a clue what any of that feels like. There's only one thing on the ballot: whether or not this country is going to survive as a democracy, and we're going to be able to move forward in a country where we have 335 million people who are very different from one another, do not believe in the same religion, where we can revel in our differences and everybody can have the same rights. We're going to decide whether we are those people, whether we have the intestinal fortitude to do what England and France just did, or whether we're going to sit here and be distracted by a bunch of people on the right who are amplifying all of this, and the media, which is picking it up and amplifying it further. It's up to the American people to cut through the clutter here. Some people are capable of it, some people aren't. The people who aren't, I have no use for. That's the only thing on the ballot that matters come November, is democracy in America. Remember what Joni Mitchell said? Don't it always seem to go that you don't know what you've got till it's gone? Personally, I have children and I fear for them. I'm not interested in losing it. I suggest we pull our shit together and get this done. I'll talk to you all later.